What's up, Canes fans? Welcome to the CanesInSight podcast. Very up and down, exciting at times weekend for Canes baseball. We're going to talk about it with former Canes pitcher, the man who threw the 23rd perfect game in Division I history, Javi Salas. But first, before we get into that, a word from some of the biggest supporters of Canes baseball you'll ever find, Sal Asteroid and Cox.
This episode of the CanesInsight podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sala Astorita and Cox, a boutique law firm focusing on securities regulatory matters, broker-dealer and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigation, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Contact them now at 561-989-9080 or visit them online at salalaw.com.
All right, we are here with the newly engaged Javi Salas. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm good, D. Good weekend. Good weekend for me. Tough weekend for the Canes, but all in all, happy to be here, man.
Congratulations to you. Congratulations to Mrs. Perfect. It's just awesome.
She's gonna like that.
Hey,
She's gonna like that.
She deserves it. She deserves it. You did it once. She does it all the time, right? So, anyways, talking about the weekend, probably the game of the year from my perspective on Thursday. I know that game of Cuvée hit the go-ahead against Virginia was really fun, but you were there at the light on Thursday. That had to be one of the most exciting games.
Yeah, and I'm not speaking in hyperbole. That was probably one of the best pitched baseball games I've seen at Mark Light in a really long time by Gage Zeal. Absolutely tremendous. The 15 strikeouts, complete game. Accentuated by that Jaxscen walk-off home run. I mean, that game had everything. It was a tremendous best game of the year.
So let's talk about the pitching. Obviously, it was a pitcher's duel, but from Gage Zeal, he's had some rough games, maybe inflated the ERA more than what he is as a pitcher. What did you see from him on Thursday that allowed him to be so dominant?
Yeah, I think just speaking from the totality of the season, what's great about Gage is he gives you a chance to win every Friday night, right? I think we keep talking and harping about like what the pitching staff is, and for the better part of the season, it's been the weaker spot between the offense and the defense, etc. What Gage did on Friday was absolutely spectacular. I mean, that pitching performance keeping us not only in the game but against the number 2 team in the country, right? Clemson comes ranked number 2 in the nation, number 1 in the RPI. They off a weekend with Florida State where they had scored 40 runs, right? So holding them at bay, keeping Miami in the ball game, and then to go 9 innings on top of that. How many 9-inning games do we see, right? Like, we don't see it in professional baseball anymore. We don't see it in college anymore. Complete games are a thing of the past. Like, what Gage Zeal did was a total bulldog mentality. I mean, just up and down, mowing down the Clemson Tigers. 15 strikeouts, which, I mean, look, I'm not a strikeout pitcher. I never was. I don't know the feeling that he was in that zone. I was a ground ball guy, but I mean, he was making guys look silly. It was fastballs, sliders, changeups, you name it. He had it going for him. And then again, it's just, taking all the punches, understanding he's pitching in a nail biter game. He couldn't make any mistakes, gives Miami a chance. And then Jaxscen hits a walk-off in the 9th inning, which was, I mean, just absolutely tremendous.
Yeah. And that moment is, you had to wait a little bit too, right? With the review.
Yeah.
It was scary for a second. But just Scanlon for a second, what he brings, because that was obviously a change from the beginning of the year, having him as the primary catcher. What do you think? What do you think he brings that's different as a catcher? Yeah,
look, and I think we talked early in the year to Coach Gutierrez, and I remember him saying, and Coach Arteaga as well, they had 1A and 1B in Perez and Scanlon, right? It was the perfect situation where they had a right-handed hitting Perez, a left-handed hitting Scanlon. They could platoon them. They could take turns on the weekend. We've kind of seen Jaxscen take that starting position, grab the bull by the horns, and has really solidified himself as the everyday catcher for the Canes, right? He's hitting over 300, does a great job behind the plate, good thrower of the baseball. This guy was a big-time prospect when he committed to Oregon as a high school senior. So we kind of waited a little bit to see what we had in Jaxscen, but, he's proving everybody right now in terms of his play. Obviously, at home run D, I mean, you look at what that was like. I mean, in the 9th inning of a really tight ball game, number 2 team in the country, hits one off the parking garage. And then we have the drama, they celebrate at home plate. They take off his shirt and the umpires go inside, and there was no angle, man. There was no way that they were gonna, overturn that call. I mean, come on, like how would we ever think about going back on that moment? But I mean, look, credit to the kid. He got a really good pitch to hit. That was a tough Clemson closer. He was throwing hard. He turned that fastball around. I mean, I've seen some shots. I've seen the Yonder Alonso, Yasmani Grandal. That ball looked like it just disappeared into the night from my vantage point, man. It was one of the cooler home runs. Looked like a scene from The Natural, man. The ball like kind of hitting off the lights, disappearing, has no idea where it goes, and the stadium goes into pandemonium. So well pitched game. Gage Zeal keeps us in the game, and then Jaxscen delivers the final blow. It was just a great night for the Hurricanes.
He had to put his shirt back on.
Yeah.
But no, that was an awesome game. Really, kind of in many ways a similar game the next day on Friday, just with a different result. So, starting with the good, what did you see from Raef on the mound?
Yeah, Raef kept us in the game, similar to Gage. He kept taking Clemson's best shot. On the offensive side, Miami left a lot of guys on base, but Raef kept pitching, kept going out there. He got stronger as the game went on. I mean, I was sitting behind home plate in that seventh inning. He's throwing fastballs at 94, 95, hit 96 in the seventh inning. So, like, as a pitching coach, as Coach Artiaga, Coach Gutierrez, you're encouraged by seeing that. I mean, obviously, pitching is one of those things that's very contagious. I remember being in a starting rotation. My rotation was stacked when I played. You go out there, you're sitting on the bench. Raef keeping book the night before he pitches. He's keeping Gage's stats. You want to go out there and do the same thing. You want to match what Gage did. You want to go out there and match the same intensity, come off the mound and yell and scream and with the big outs and stuff like that. So I thought it was a great job by Raef. He kept Clemson at bay. He had a rough first and second inning. Clemson got to him a little bit, a couple of base hits, but like they always say with good starters, you got to get him early, right, before he gets comfortable. Once he settled into the game, it became a totally different ball game, kept Miami in it. Really encouraged by Raef's performance on Friday night.
Now, seeing him a few times now as a weekend starter, getting more of a feel for what he can do. I mean, do you think he's a potential pro down the line?
Absolutely. And I think, D, what we're seeing more and more at the pro level is do you have swing and miss stuff, right? Because what we're seeing is guys trying to lift the ball, trying to hit the ball gap to gap. And what Raef can do is he hides the ball so well. He's a funky lefty with a different arm slot. We've had a lot of those come through the Carson. He reminds me a lot of Carson Palm because I think Carson's stuff was a little more advanced at this, time in his career. But Raef hasn't really thrown a lot. I mean, in college, he threw 30-something innings last year. So it's his first time as a starter. This is his 6th or 7th start. Really trying to feel himself, trying to get back into the rhythm of that. And I think he's gotten better. Granted, I think he'd like the results to be a little better. But look, we're looking at ERAs across the country, across the conference. They're inflated everywhere, right? Guys are hitting the ball all over the yard. So a 3-2 game on Thursday night, a 3-2 game on Friday night, really close, really well-pitched games. Like, that's exactly what you want to see from Miami starting pitchers.
And now focusing on the bad, really, Saturday, we only talk about too much of the actual game. It was a domination by Clemson, but just overall kind of the story of the weekend, even in the game that Miami won on Thursday, 5 runs.
Yeah.
That used to be an inning a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
So what's happening with Miami's offense?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, over the last 2 weekends, Notre Dame, Friday and Saturday, Clemson, the totality of the weekend scoring 5 runs. The offense has sort of taken a step back, and we're seeing, the ups and downs of a baseball season. There's going to be weekends, and whether you like it or not, where offense slumps. And you look at Clemson, right? I just mentioned they scored 40 runs against Florida State the prior weekend. They score 5 runs over the course of Friday and Saturday too. Granted, they break out on Sunday and score 7 runs, but it wasn't like this was an offensive explosion by either team, right? So it was a well-pitched series. We've seen 2 weekends now where Miami's offense has definitely lagged behind the pitching. It's a whole lineup thing. I mean, we haven't seen the guys getting at the top of the order, getting on base as much. Villegas and Sear have struggled a little bit. Cavey, his average for the first time as a freshman dips under 400, right? So, I mean, he's hitting 396. Granted, he's still right there, but the first time in the season we've seen him under 400. Jason Torres still hitting the cover off the ball, and he's probably the most consistent offensive player for the Hurricanes right now. But we're just seeing really well-pitched games, and this is what's going to happen. I mean, the conference is stacked. I'm looking at the rankings right now. There's 8 ACC-ranked teams in the top 25, which is unbelievable. So you look at a tough conference coupled with, the ups and downs of a baseball season, coupled with a really young lineup, and you're just going to get these fluctuations week to week, right? Miami's sitting at 6-6, going on the road to Duke. So this is another opportunity to say, hey, we got to win this series coming off back-to-back series losses.
Before we move on to Duke, another ranked top 10 team.
Yeah.
From a pitcher's perspective, we talked a lot about the big 3 hitters, right?
Yeah.
Probably more about Cuvée and Sear just because of their names. But it seems like Torres has really become the most consistent, overall well-rounded hitter. I just want to talk to you from how you look at those 3 from a pitching perspective and how you might attack them differently and the problems they might present to you as a pitcher.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. We've talked a lot about Cavey and Sear just because of, kind of the personas that they are. Sear coming as a, sophomore, all-world freshman, Hollywood is his nickname, right? Daniel Cavez, the freshman this year that's really taken the league by storm. Then you kind of have Jason Torres, who's a dark horse for this lineup. And look, as a pitcher, to answer your question, what scares me most about Jason Torres is he's a sort of a free swinger, right? We see the strikeout numbers a little elevated and on his, the back of his baseball card, but the fact that he can kind of swing at everything, if you're in the zone a lot, he's going to make contact. He's going to hit the ball hard. I think that's the thing that he does better than anybody is he makes really, really solid contact. I think he's a very advanced hitter too. We see him go the other way, drives the ball to right center field. He's not afraid to take the single, knowing that he's going to get his pitch later in the game. So Jason Torres is one of those guys. I mean, incredible prep career, all-world guy out of high school. I mean, we talked about him, one of Dade County legends. Comes into this lineup and just fits right in and didn't get a whole lot of reps last year, not a lot of at-bats behind Yo-Yo Morales. But again, the free swinging mentality, the guy who kind of always has the green light. It's like you never want to fight the crazy guy. That's kind of like Jason Torres, right? You don't want to throw strikes to the guy who swings at everything. So from my perspective as a pitcher, you got to kind of knock Jason Torres off his game. I think, kind of use that free swinging against him. But again, man, I credit the kid. His hand-eye coordination, his bat to ball skills are some of the best I've seen in college in the last couple of years.
All right. So it's always kind of one or the other. We were saying what needs to happen with the pitching staff. Now we're talking about the offense, and you're headed into really the most important stretch probably of the year. You tell me if I'm wrong, but 12 of 18 of the road seems like this is when the season is going to sort of define itself. So starting with just playing on the road in general, you've talked about this, I know in the group chats offline, just how much, because obviously every sport being on the road is tough. It seems like in college baseball, there's a little more to playing on the road, both in how it impacts your ability to make the postseason and just in general. So talking about playing on the road from a college player's perspective.
Yeah, look, I think let's hit the most important stuff off the top. I think, the RPI points, you get more points for wins. You playing on the road, you get an advantage, right? If you can win games, it gives you an extra RPI percentage. That's really how you see the RPI jumps. I mean, I'm looking at the RPI this morning. Top two teams are Clemson and Florida State. Carolina's number 4. So, Miami's got plenty of opportunity. They go to Duke this weekend. They got Florida State next weekend on the road. So you got 2 ranked opponents on the road back-to-back weekends, 6 games. I mean, Miami's got to win these series. They got to figure out a way to win series. And, look, playing on the road is tough. It's also a fun environment for some of these guys, right? Like you think about the freshmen and sophomores on the team. They haven't taken a lot of road trips. This is where the team kind of bonds together. You're going to go to some hostile places. Duke, depending on where they play on campus or at Durham Bulls Athletic Park, won't be the most hostile environment, but it's a super fun environment to play in. Like, again, the camaraderie, the team building, like this is where, the team really sets itself apart, where you see the leaders, kind of make sure everyone stays in check, everyone's around. You have nowhere to go on the road. You have your bus, you have your, bus to the stadium, you bus back to the hotel, guys are eating in the lobby, guys are, you're meeting people's parents. So it's a cool environment for the Canes. And look, there's no shortage of ranked opponents left on the schedule. We're going to face the number 9 team in Duke this weekend in Durham. And I fully expect a really good series. I mean, the Duke program has really taken off the last couple of years. They've done some really good things, a couple of super regional appearances. So, we're sitting at 6-6 right now. It's definitely anyone's guess who can win the Coastal. Virginia Tech's kind of separated themselves a little bit in the standings, but with 8 ranked teams in the conference, this conference is as loaded as ever. So, I mean, winning a series here against Duke will really be a great step forward for the Canes.
And look, there's another road game that we're not even talking about, which is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. So against Florida Atlantic, we in the early in the season, it was all about the midweeks, right?
Right.
And Miami turning it around there. I think they have, not in dominant fashion, but they've been winning midweek games the last couple of weeks. What do they need to do to keep that rolling against FAU?
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing is I think they found their midweek starter in Ashton Crowther. I think that was the biggest question mark week to week was who was going to start, how much could they give us. We talked about some injuries on the pitching staff. Those are just a lot of question marks going into these midweek games. It seems like we've solidified that. Ashton Crowther has kind of taken that role and run with it. So it's nice for JD and Coach Gutierrez to pencil his name in, knowing that that's going to be your starter. We lost to FAU in Boca already earlier this year, so you got to go up there and win that game. I think there's no more excuses for these midweek games. I think you ask JD, you ask Coach Fencer, you ask Coach Gutierrez, they'll tell you the same thing. You got to win these games. And look, with a conference as tough as it is on the weekends, you got to use these midweek games to sort of prime yourself. Start playing good baseball, good base running, good defense, good pitching. All the little things, all the little fundamentals that are going to really show up on the weekends, you got to take care of them here in the midweeks. And to your point, they have seemed to sort of right the ship a little bit. They beat FIU, back-to-back weeks. So a great opportunity again. FAU is a tough ball club, D. I mean, they've always given us trouble. They've given me plenty of trouble in my career. So I definitely know that going up to Boca is no easy task, but it's definitely a game that, the Canes have to win.
And, in terms of the fundamentals, I see it in the group chat all the time, and I see it on the CanesInsight.com message boards, which, by the way, the most active Canes baseball community on the planet. Those game threads get hundreds of replies. But base running, been a hot topic, whether it's Dorian stretching a double that doesn't get there, the slip at running third. It seems like we hear a lot about base running, and everybody's got an opinion on it. What have you seen from Miami's base running that needs to improve?
Yeah, look, I think, in today's day and age of baseball, the long ball has kind of eradicated the need to be really fundamentally sound base running wise. I think it's just at every single level. I think you hear coaches talking about it. I know I hear Harold Martinez talking about it at the high school level. We see it at the college level, at the big league level too. It's just, it's one of those focus areas where good base runners, you never hear about them, right? Because they just know what they're doing. But it seems like the bad base running blunders really get magnified in close ball games, right? So on Thursday night, Miami gets picked off on second base on an inside move. There was a bunt attempt where it's one of those things where it's a really great play by Clemson. They go ahead and the pitcher lifts his leg, inside move. The runner takes his secondary lead, thinking he's going to, the pitch is going home, gets picked off there. And then on Friday night, we have the slip around third base. Granted, that was one of the more, it was a tough play just because the ball in no man's land, it gets kicked away. I know Coach Fencer was initially holding up Lucas Costello, and then he starts waving him around, and Lucas, face planted rounding third base. But again, the fundamentals of baseball in close games kind of reveal themselves. And, the last couple of weeks, I've definitely seen the message boards. They've been active, and base running has been a hot topic. So I'm sure we'll continue to be, as long as there are blunders. But look, I think it's more of a widespread thing than just in Miami. And I attribute that more to, the long ball era, right? I think we've kind of lost the art of the singles and doubles and stealing bases. I know JD, one of his big focus areas this year was we're going to be a more aggressive team on the base path. We're going to try and steal some bases. And we've seen that. Now, the other side of the coin is we need to probably get a little bit smarter around the base paths, and not give away outs. I mean, outs are so valuable. You talk about whether it's the old guard or the new guard, the analytics, 27 outs are so valuable, and how you can scatter them and get them. You never want to give them away. So, there's a fine line between being aggressive and making, the dumber baseball play. I think Miami's just, unfortunately, in some of these close games, these base running blunders get magnified a little bit.
Yeah. Thursday, again, I never played baseball, but just seeing that sidewinder, that pickoff on second, it tricked me watching it on TV. I mean, that was, I don't know how you see that. It's such a weird delivery that guy had.
Look, and it was a deceptive movement. I'll tell you what, Clemson's a very good ball club. I will give them that. They're very fundamentally sound. Coach Eric Bakich, he was at Maryland when I played, went to Michigan, had great success, took Michigan to the College World Series, gets the gig back at Clemson. And he was, I saw a lot of, you don't see it at a professional level, those offensive timeouts in college where, he kind of calls everybody in. He had another situation where he took out his starting pitcher on Friday night in a 2-2 count against Carlos Perez, who had, 8 or 9 pitch at bat, comes out, takes him out. So Clemson was sort of, working the game. They constantly were just, he was constantly calling timeouts, going out to the mound. There was a lot of you could tell that they're very in tune with what they're doing. And that inside move on Thursday night with the sidewinder was a great example of that. I think he knew, Miami was trying to bunt the runners over, and the kid, did a great inside move. And it is a deceptive play. Granted, you got to be a smart base runner and know in that situation that oftentimes you see pitchers come in, relievers come in. That's the first thing they do. Not so much to pick off the runner, but to see if, get a read off if the batter's going to be bunting, right? Because if as soon as he lifts his leg, the batter squares around to bunt. Okay, now everybody knows he's bunting. Let's set up our defense. In that situation, he lifted his leg. Antonio Jimenez takes 3 or 4 steps off the bag, and it's an easy pitch and catch to throw him out at second base. So, we saw Clemson play really fundamentally sound. And look, man, they're the number 2 team in the country, and they showed that on Friday and the way they won on Saturday in decisive fashion.
And Antonio Jimenez, I want to talk about him real quick, just because someone with a lot of talent, a lot of expectations. What do you think he needs to do to really get going at the plate?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I see the freshman guys, and I was a freshman that struggled too as a pitcher, not as a hitter, right? So I just think you're seeing so much advanced stuff, and you're asking a lot of a freshman to play, a premier position, right? He's starting every day at shortstop. He's kind of hidden in that 9th spot in the lineup. But if you can get anything out of Antonio Jimenez in terms of whether it's walks, whether it's good situational hitting, moving runners over, bunting guys over, I think that's what we need to see more of out of him in the 9th spot. Granted, he's had his struggles this year. I think that's to be expected as a freshman. We didn't expect him to be, a Gold Glove shortstop or, hitting like Nomar Garcia Parr right out of the chute. But I've seen some really good things out of him. He's an aggressive ball player. He looks the part. I mean, he's physically imposing. He's 6'2", looks every bit of 200 pounds. So, I mean, he's a guy that I'd like to see. We keep talking about, development is not linear. I keep harping on that. But at some point, we need to see that trajectory sort of change and say, like, okay, this is the guy for the future. And I think these next couple of weeks, we'll find out a lot about him.
All right. Last thing before I let you go, we talked about a lot of different things, but when you sit down on your couch this weekend, what's the main thing you're looking for?
Number one, I just want to see some wins, man. I want to see Miami go into Duke and win that series. I mean, last time we were at Duke, Dom Patelli hits a grand slam on Friday night. They take the series there. Duke. My old stomping ground. Spent a couple years in Durham, so I know that program well. I think Coach Pollard, really good ball coach. They got a lot of good players there. A lot of guys that have had success going to the pro level. They've got a lot of talent, especially they got a lot of arms. So I expect some close games this weekend. This conference is just stacked, man. You look at up and down the standings and you realize like there's no easy weekends. There's no team that you can hide from. And I think Miami should want that challenge. They should accept that challenge. And look, I've had a ton of fun watching this team this year. We're looking at a team that's 15-12, 6-6 in the conference, and the wins and losses might not jump out at you, but watching these games game to game has been so fun as a fan, as a former player, watching the comebacks, watching this team not give up. Granted, there have been some lumps in the road, and I keep saying that those are going to happen. We got to expect those with a young ball club. But what I want to see is I want to see some winning baseball. I know that it's in there. I know this team is capable of it, and I just hope it carries on to this weekend. And then, as we continue this ACC slate, man, I keep saying I think 500 in the conference gives you a really, really good chance of the NCAA tournament. We're sitting at 500 right now, so let's hope that trend continues.
Awesome. Look, great weekend for the Salas family. Be a great weekend for Canes baseball, hopefully coming up. Always appreciate you, man.
Thanks, D. Go Canes.